Good evening to all you lovers of liberty and crazy anti-vaxxers. It's me, your friendly neighborhood reacting American. For my few subscribers, I apologize for my absence. I recently moved out of state and have spent a lot of time working on the new house. However, I'm pretty much always working on projects for my channels, and the video I started working on during the move has since morphed into 3 separate videos on related topics. My plan is to get the first of these 3 out in the few weeks following this video, and release the other 2 shortly after that. I was inspired to start this project when the riots of summer 2020 brought the issue of statue removal to my doorstep. The videos will cover a lot of interrelated topics such as imperialism, European conquest, Western cultural values, and people's conceptions and attitudes regarding all of these things. But before releasing those more complex videos, I wanted to do a short video, first of all, to let everybody know that I haven't died and I haven't given up on my channel, but also because this is an issue that is impacting all of us and to some effect is running all of our lives at the moment. So allow me to vent just a little bit about the COVID. To keep your eye entertained while I go on just a bit of a rant, I'll run a montage of clips from the movie Outbreak in the background because why not? The movie is about a serious contagion and the attempt to contain it, so I figured it has some relation to the topic at hand. Like a lot of those 90s disaster movies, it's a little cheesy, but hey, that doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video, does it? About 18 months have passed since I became personally aware of the coronavirus, and certainly enough time has passed for me to make some detailed observations. Like the rest of you, I've seen all form and manner of reactions to this pandemic, from the opinions of the closest personal contacts in my life to the vast myriad of governmental decrees. To begin with, allow me to make a few cold-hearted statements. First, this is one of the lamest pandemics mankind has probably ever seen, thank goodness. Second, this pandemic really isn't very deadly. What most people fail to do when evaluating events, subjects, etc. is putting them into proper context. You know, economists have a favorite saying when faced with a question of evaluation such as, how bad is it, or how are things doing, their response is usually, quote, compared to what? In other words, you need context when evaluating anything. Compared to many other diseases faced by humanity, such as the Black Death, tuberculosis, and the Spanish flu, COVID-19 is both tame and predictable. The deaths resulting from it are low and primarily affect very specific demographics of people.
But this isn't the bubonic plague. The CDC's best estimate is that if you're under 49, your chance for surviving COVID, if you get it, is 99.92%.
Historically, humanity faces 2 primary problems with pandemics. One is the emotional and physical anguish of suffering from contracting a disease and/or losing a loved one from that disease. And the other is the economic impact, the loss of breadwinners at the individual family level, as well as huge problems at the societal level, stagnation or cessation of economic activity, leading to other problems just as serious as the original disease, if not worse. Problems like famine, starvation, the overwhelming of medical services, etc. The worst of pandemics is the type that affects working age adults. In these pandemics, the effects are most severe at all levels. The death of adults roughly aged 15 to 45 usually means that both the parents and children of these individuals are watching them die. Moreover, since working age adults produce the majority of wealth in a household, their parents and children within the household will suffer from the loss of their primary financial support. And since this demographic also is the primary labor force in a society, the whole society and civilization usually suffers greatly from their destruction. HIV has wreaked this kind of havoc in Africa for years, the effects of which can be seen in their population pyramid. As far as the COVID goes, the rate of recovery for adults under 70 years old with no or minimal comorbidities who have contracted this virus is well north of 90%. The demographic it is primarily deadly to is the late elderly, 85 plus years old. Even then, more than 4 out of 5 in that age range were more likely to die of something other than COVID between February 2020 and February 2021. Victims of the wrath of past pandemics only wish they had had things so easy by comparison. Yes, many people have died from COVID. Many people have suffered through the illness, and some even have what may end up being lasting effects from it. But the overwhelming majority who get it just suck it up, recover, and move on with their lives, even if they do have some minimal long-lasting effects. If you think I've spoken callously, let me go one further and just say that if humanity is destined to suffer through periodic pandemics, and history tells us it must be so, then mankind could not have been luckier to get the one we did in 2020. I mean, honestly, if civilization must endure a pandemic, what better one to have than one which almost exclusively only kills that demographic which, A, has already lived their lives and raised their families, B, is more of an economic drain on society than a producer, and, because of A and B, can, C, most afford to isolate themselves and have their freedoms restricted. Hell, most people over 80 already keep their daily activities and travels to a minimum as it is, so let them continue that if they want. If it means more to grandma to get a couple more candles on the birthday cake than to receive hugs from her grandchildren, that is her choice, and her space should be respected. But if grandma supports keeping her grandchildren out of school, that is another story. People who support this nonsense do so out of some sort of broadly defined concept of, quote, public safety, but what apparently doesn't occur to them is that they are defining their actions by their hoped-for consequences rather than their procedural characteristics. This is not surprising. People do this all the time without thinking about it, but you bet your ass I'm going to point it out to them. So to all you all out there who support these continuing lockdowns, start calling it what it is. You are willingly complicating the lives, restricting the freedoms, and destroying the futures of America's youth so you can feel, quote, safe, or who knows, maybe even a little virtuous. You are depriving them of all the things you already got to enjoy: close contact socializing, freedom to come and go as you please, and a bright economic future, among other things. I know your intentions are good, but they're really starting to spit up all over everyone else. Besides, whatever your intentions are in attempting to increase public safety, there is no quantifiably objective definition of safety. Risk is inherent in living life. The more resources you spend in attempting to absolutely reduce one risk, the more you open yourself up to another risk. The problem is, the economic trade-offs involved are often simply ignored out of a simplistically childish belief that showing concern for the economics is simply, quote, only caring about money. But ignoring or dismissing the trade-offs does not make them go away. Destroying an economy to slightly reduce the risk of death to less than 10% of a population is only opening up the likelihood that the other 90% will suffer greater risk to life in the present and future in other ways. The fact is, wealth is a considerable lifesaver in and of itself. In terms of the loss of life, the United States has weathered storms, earthquakes, pandemics, etc. far better than other nations which actually endured catastrophes of lesser magnitude, but did not have the economic power or resources to enact life-saving measures on the scale that the US could. The government response to COVID is slowly destroying our economy. Americans are simply insulated from this knowledge by the mass printing of money the government has engaged in the past 18 months. But trust me, this can only be sustained so long. The long-term results will prove to be disastrous, particularly for people 45 and under who still must work and provide for families for many years to come. On another note, the psychology around the virus and the vaccine has also been tragically fascinating to me. The degree to which both are empowered by people is just shameful. When someone young and healthy gets such emotional relief from receiving the vaccine, I want to say to them, great, now what are you going to do about the fact you'll probably still die from a car wreck, cancer, or heart disease? Just a side note here, I get just a little bit rankled by these fat Americans who couldn't be bothered to upset their lifestyle by adding in a simple exercise routine, but have no problem pushing lifestyle changes on everyone else by pressuring them into mask wearing and vaccine injections. If you're happy being overweight, fine by me. But don't then tell me that I'm endangering your life by not wearing a mask, because that's a condition that most of you chose. To be honest, I don't really see the point in young healthy people receiving the vaccines, either for the flu or for COVID-19. I'm not categorically opposed to vaccines. I have received some in the past, and I don't regret it, but again, context is everything. Aside from the pervasiveness of government coercion to transmit the vaccine to every damn person, I can't see any logical reason for a young, healthy person to do it. I mean, when we put things into our body, whether they're vitamins, drugs, or vaccines, we do so with some sort of end goal in mind, to lower cholesterol, get some sort of high, prevent sickness, whatever. But for people who so fervently subscribe to vaccinations, what is the end goal here? To never get the flu or coronavirus? I really don't understand. Since serious illnesses and conditions can be caused by vaccines, you're once again opening yourself up to a different risk set by attempting to stamp out all aspects of another risk set. So you're willing to gamble in one direction but not the other? Trust me, I've gotten influenza a few times in my life, and it definitely sucks. The symptoms and the disruption to life are no doubt frustrating, but the likelihood of it killing me is extremely low, and therefore the cost of contracting it is generally low, all other things held constant. Now that 18 months have passed, I know the situation with coronavirus is basically the same. It has been so disappointing to see how easily even intelligent people have been convinced to be afraid of a virus of which the lethality is so low. This hysteria has been achieved by constantly shoving the number of new cases down everybody's throats 24/7 for the past 18 months. But any hazard can look dangerous or deadly when put into that context. If deaths from traffic collisions were presented in this manner, are people going to stop driving so much? Shoot, if the media cared to do so, it could probably terrify the general citizenry of Chicago by portraying the risk of death among young black men in the city as a risk equally threatening to all Chicagoans. But I better be careful. Lori Lightfoot is demonstrating enough tyranny without my help. Yes, I get it. New cases aren't great. People getting sick en masse sucks. But the idea of flattening the curve and protecting society went out the window when you started dropping money from helicopters while at the same time shutting down productive business. Bottom line, the death rate is low and almost restricted to a small demographic, which can most afford to sacrifice their freedoms. Sure, from an emotional standpoint, we all may be saddened by the loss of our elderly loved ones, but that's going to happen sooner or later regardless of any pandemic, and such emotions should not be the groundwork for political, social, and economic policy on a mass scale. And yet, this is exactly what we have seen. Time and again in history, mankind has surrendered freedoms for the perception of safety. That's exactly what is happening here. Maybe one of these days I'll make a video about that subject specifically, but for now, that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening to this little rant, folks. I'm the Reacting American, and for now, I am out of here.